Hi, this is Steve Dale, and this is part of our MCLE series here. And today we're going to talk about affordable housing here with Tom Heinz, who's the Executive Director of East Bay Innovations here. And I'm going to have him tell us a little bit about East Bay Innovations in a bit. But we're really excited that, Tom is here to talk to us today about this subject. I will tell you that, and I think it's fair to say, housing is probably the largest issue we deal with, second to attendant care and that sort of thing. And so, part of this housing is for all people in the U.S. and especially in California is important. But, when you're dealing with persons with disabilities, this is such an essential service and all that. And, oftentimes these programs get really confusing. So, part of this is we're really happy to have Tom to go through kind of an overview of how these housing programs work and all of that. The thing that I'll mention here with Tom is, Tom, how long have you been doing direct service provider work? It's been a few years?
Oh, yeah, 1985. I started.
Yeah, Tom has been doing this work for a long time, and East Bay Innovations, which he's been the director of for quite a long time, is an incredibly well-respected organization here in California that provides direct services to persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities here, and once again has always been a leader in providing those services. The other thing that Tom, and maybe when we get towards the end we can talk about this a little bit, but Tom has been working on a program here, and once again, Tom, I'm going to need the name for you again because I have a short attention.
Life Trust Care.
Life Trust Care, and part of this this program is providing a different layer, different alternatives for attendant care for persons, for all persons with disabilities. There's been a number of programs we've done already on this, and we'll be doing more because this has been funded by the May and Stanley Smith Charitable Trust here. And what this is it's a program that's growing that provides, once again, a lot of the services that have always been only available for folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and expanding a lot of those hands-on services here as far as assisting with trust for all persons with disabilities. And we're pretty excited about that too. So it doesn't surprise me that East Bay Innovations would be on the cutting edge of something new. With that, Tom, here, if you could tell us a little bit about East Bay Innovations and, leading into your work with housing and that kind of thing. Let's go ahead with the programs. The one thing that I will mention is that Amy is monitoring the chats here. So if you have questions, we're going to do our best to answer those questions towards the end of the formal presentation. So what you would need to do is that if you have a specific question for Tom, just go to the chat box here and type in your question. And then when it's time for questions and answers, we'll try to get to as many of those as we can. So, Tom?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Happy to be here. Thanks for joining us. East Bay Innovations has been around since 1994. We're a nonprofit organization. We started supported living services in 1994, and we're very inspired by the model of helping, such a wide variety of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities to live in their own home. So we started with supported living. And then over the years, we started independent living service, similar to supported living, but serving people with intellectual and developmental disabilities who are more on a path towards independence. And then we started supported employment services. And within supported employment services, we have several Project Search training programs. For those of you who know Project Search, we were one of the first agencies in California to start a Project Search program. And then we started a program that does case management and transition services for anybody who has a disability residing in a skilled nursing facility that's on Medi-Cal. And in California, that service is called California Community Transitions, or CCT. We've started that about 10 years ago. We've helped almost 200 people transition from skilled nursing into their own homes. And then more recently, we branched out under whole person care funding through Alameda County's Healthcare Services Agency, where we're reaching folks with chronic health conditions and or disabilities who are homeless or on the verge of homelessness to find affordable housing. So we do a lot of affordable housing work, not as a provider of affordable housing, but as a catalyst, I would say, for affordable housing. We're big on partnerships. We have really a great community of nonprofit affordable housing agencies in Alameda County, which is our main county that we do work in. And we partner with lots of nonprofits, housing organizations, and housing authorities to create more affordable housing opportunities for people with disabilities. So I'm going to, like Steve says, the affordable housing world is complicated, to say the least. I'm going to attempt to give you guys the foundational knowledge that you need to have in order to know what programs are out there and basically how they work. And then, I'm expecting a lot of questions, which is great. So that'll enable us to dig deeper into different areas of affordable housing that you guys are interested in. Basically, the really still the golden goose of affordable housing is Section 8 program. Section 8 program's been around a long time. It's there for people who are low income to receive assistance in paying their rent. The great thing about the Section 8 program still is that it's a subsidy that enables you to pay only 30% of your income towards the rent. So it's a deep subsidy. And if you have a housing choice voucher, there's two types of vouchers, which we'll get into a little bit. But the housing choice voucher program is the voucher program where you take the voucher with you. So it's portable, so you can use it with different landlords in different counties after a while, and also you can transport it across the country if you want to too. So that's the voucher program that we prefer the most, and it's administered through the public housing authorities. Now that's also kind of complicated. To follow the chain of funding, it goes from the public housing authorities, or PHAs, and it goes directly to HUD. So the PHAs get funding from HUD, federal agency, to do a variety of programs. And the most well-known and probably the biggest program is the Section 8 program. The housing authorities, and well, I should say that you can, for people with developmental disabilities and many people with disabilities, the Section 8 program is available to people who are not so what we would think of as low income. There's quite a ability to be on the Section 8 program and have your income rise, have some employment, certainly have access to public benefits like SSI or SSDI, and you don't get kicked off the program. So you can't exceed $52,650 per year in Alameda County. So that's, for many people that we serve, they're far away, unfortunately, from having that sort of income. So the program stays with them. You hear things like the voucher program is only authorized every 5 years. That is true. It is theoretically possible for a housing authority to discontinue vouchers if they have a reduction in funding. But in our experience, people have had their Section 8 vouchers for years and years. So it's not, in our estimation, it's not likely that the program is going to go away because of funding cuts. Now, the housing authorities are arranged in sort of an interesting way. In Alameda County, there's cities that have their own housing authorities. So in Alameda County, City of Oakland, of course, has a big housing authority. City of Berkeley has a housing authority. City of Alameda, City of Livermore. And then all the other communities that don't have their own housing authority fall under the county housing authority, which in Alameda County it's called HACA, or the Housing Authority of the County of Alameda. HACA covers Emeryville, Albany, San Leandro, Hayward, Dublin, Pleasanton, Castro Valley, and the Tri-Cities, Newark, Union City, and Fremont. So what this means is, well, the difficult thing about the Section 8 program for sure is that in normal times, the waiting list for a Section 8 voucher only comes up maybe as an average every 5 years. It's different in different housing authorities. And then it's likely when the waiting list opens that there'll be a huge announcement of it, and many people will apply. And over the last 10, 15 years, we see housing authorities do a lottery to get onto the wait list. So when the wait list opens, you don't just get on the wait list, you go into a lottery to get on the wait list, and you may not be selected to get on the wait list. If you're lucky enough to be selected to get on the wait list, in normal times, the wait is another probably 5 years to get a voucher. That's an average. Some housing authorities like Livermore tend to move faster for some reason, I'm not sure why, than the larger housing authorities. But usually it's quite a wait. So it's, in normal times, it's pretty hard to get a voucher, but it's well worth it to try and get one because of its deep subsidy, its portability, and its longevity. Okay, so here's where we get into the three main programs that housing authorities usually have are public housing, which is housing that's owned and controlled by the housing authority. And there's usually a separate waiting list to get into housing authority controlled housing. That's called public housing. So in public housing, if you get a unit within a complex that the housing authority owns, you pay just 30% of your income towards the rent. So it acts, the subsidy is as deep as the Section 8 program, but you lose portability. So if you're in public housing, typically you can't take that subsidy with you unless the housing authority has a program that moves people from public housing to the voucher program. Some housing authorities do that. Then the other way that housing authorities assist is through project-based Section 8 subsidies. So project-based, it's sort of similar to public housing, but the housing authority doesn't control the complex. Usually they do a request for proposals to developers or nonprofit housing corporations. They apply, and they'll apply for an apartment project. And if they get selected by the housing authority, then that apartment, controlled by a non-housing authority entity, will have units within it that are subsidized at 30% of people's incomes. Those are called project-based Section 8 vouchers. And they're used more and more commonly now. In general, housing authorities are trying to get away from owning a lot of housing themselves. So the project-based voucher option allows them to basically have sort of a public housing model, but within a complex that's not owned by the housing authority. And then the third main program by the housing authorities is the Housing Choice Section 8 voucher program. Let's see. Okay, so the good news, or something that you should be looking for, whether you're in Alameda County or not, is whether your housing authority is participating in the mainstream program. The mainstream program is a Trump administration program that the housing authorities can apply to get additional housing choice vouchers for people with disabilities. Now, the mainstream program, several housing authorities in our area in Alameda County have applied to the mainstream program, have gotten additional vouchers for people with disabilities. What the housing authorities in our area have done is that they partner with different disability organizations, and the disability organizations make referrals to the mainstream program. The housing authorities that are participating in this have already gone through their general wait list for the Housing Choice Voucher Program. They've identified people with disabilities that are on that list, and they've offered vouchers to those folks. And they tend to have additional vouchers left over, and that's when partnering agencies like EBI make referrals to the housing authorities for people that we serve to get vouchers. There's been several rounds of the mainstream program. So Housing Authority of the County of Alameda, for example, I think has gotten 3 allotments now. So it's been great in that it's not just a one-shot deal. The housing authorities have been able to access additional rounds of vouchers too. Oh, there's your code. Oh, Steve, you're on mute, I think.
Okay, sorry about that delay. I should mention that this program has been accredited for MCLE credit with the State Bar for attorneys and fiduciaries. And in order to apply for credit, what you need to do is contact amy@gspt.org. There's a form to be filled out, and there'll be 3 MCLE codes you need to fill in. So the first code is going to be 8364. If you don't have the MCLE credit application in front of you, email amy@gspt.org and she'll send you the form here. By the way, we have had some questions about whether or not these materials will be available, and they will be available. Also, the recording will be available, and we can cover that later. Anyway, Tom, let's get back to the fascinating world of public housing.
Okay. The other affordable housing program that I wanted to make you aware of too is HUD's 811 Public Rental Assistance Program. This is not a program that goes through the housing authorities. This is outside the housing authorities. It is a HUD program, and it was created in 2011, 2012 under the Obama administration, and it was meant to, originally it was meant to assist people to transition from institutional-like settings, people with disabilities, into their own homes. It was meant to be a companion program for a federal initiative called Money Follows the Person, or MFP. MFP is a Health and Human Services Medicaid program that states could apply to if they wanted to assist people with disabilities to move from institutionalized settings. MFP in California is called California Community Transitions, or CCT. CCT is a service that EBI provides that helps people transition through case management to help people who are residing in institutions. And in California, that's mainly meant people with disabilities who are stuck in skilled nursing facilities and are Medi-Cal recipients and need assistance to move out. Much of that assistance is locating affordable housing. As you can imagine, if you're in a skilled nursing facility, it's very, very hard to find your own affordable housing for a lot of reasons. The MFP program in California, it's called CCT again, offers some funding, not just for case management to help you locate and prepare to move, but it also pays for things like first month's rent and security deposit, money for modifications for accessibility once you found a place, money even for home furnishings like linens and dishware and cookware and basic furnishings. So the two programs together, the HUD 811 program, was a way to enhance affordable housing options for people who wish to transition. And then the CCT program in California assists people with all the other kind of needs that they might have to make a successful transition into their own home. So the HUD 811 program, you guys may remember that name, the 811 program. Years and years ago, the 811 program used to be a source from HUD that nonprofit housing development corporations could apply to create housing for people with disabilities. And in the old 811 program, it was really to pay for bricks and mortar, either new construction or rehabilitation of housing. And then it was almost always funding segregated housing complexes or projects for people with disabilities. When the Obama administration retooled the 811 program, they made it more like a project-based voucher program, meaning that the state, instead of the housing authorities, in this case in the 811 program, the state of California and other states had to apply to get this source of funding. California did. And then from the state level, nonprofit housing developers, can be for-profit housing developers too, apply for funding to set aside units for people with disabilities with a priority of people transitioning from institutionalized settings. So when the funding actually reaches the housing developer, it really acts like a project-based voucher where a number of units are set aside. There's specific mix of bedroom sizes too. And those units are available to people who meet the target population. So there's basically two big target populations in the HUD 811 program now, and that's people with disabilities receiving Medi-Cal who reside in institutionalized settings. Usually that's skilled nursing facilities in California, or people who are regional center clients. Regional center, of course, for those that you don't know, that's the case management and funding hub for people with developmental disabilities in California. So it's regional center clients who are either reside in institution. For regional center clients, institutions are defined in the 811 program in California as either being like a state hospital, could be a skilled nursing facility. There are regional center clients who reside in skilled nursing facilities. Most likely it's a group home, either an intermediate care facility that's funded by Medi-Cal or a community care facility that's funded by the regional center. Those are both considered institutions for HUD's 811 program purposes. Interestingly enough, the 811 program's targeting non-seniors with disabilities. So to be eligible for an 811 unit, you have to be between the ages of 18 to 61 years of age. You can be 61 years of age and 364 days. And if you get into an 811 unit, then you age in place. So they're not going to kick you out at age 62. But to get into a unit, you have to be under 62. We've been really active in this space, of course, because there's very few funding streams that come down from any affordable housing source for people with disabilities, let alone the two populations that my agency serves, you know, people with disabilities residing in nursing facilities and then people with developmental disabilities. We're one of the few, they call them tenant referral and outreach organizations. That's a 811 term, I'll talk about in just a bit. But we're one of the only TROs in California that's partnering with 811 funded developers that serves both the skilled nursing population and the regional center population. So early on, when this funding stream came out, we were talking to our nonprofit and for-profit affordable housing developers in this county about applying. And we've been successful in several cases. So I'll just go through. We have 3 projects, affordable housing projects with Mercy that house 811 units. 2 of them are in San Leandro, California. So one's at Casa Verde, which is 10 studio units. The other's at Bermuda Gardens, which is 21 bedroom units. And then more recently at Santana Gardens in Oakland, which is 7 studio units. The Promenade in Pleasanton, which is for-profit ownership, has 5 units. We're in the process now of helping Mid-Peninsula Housing to lease up 8 units of 811 funded units in Livermore. That's new construction that's just been completed, and that's called Chestnut Family Apartments. And then a few years from now, we're partnering with Resources for Community Development, or RCD, which will have 30 units at a property in Fremont that's rehab and new construction. So the 811 program, I believe, still has funding available. If you are a nonprofit housing developer or affordable housing developer and want to explore the program, you could contact me and I could walk you through the, who's involved and the basic steps of the program. I'm happy to do that. But there's still some money available. Oh, there's a code again.
So anyway, our second code is 3920. That's 3920. And once again, if you're doing this for credits as either a fiduciary or an attorney, email amy@gspt.org and she'll send you the proper form.
Thank you, Steve. A few things about the 811 program that are good to know is, the Mercy projects where we partner, there's just studios and 1-bedrooms, but the Mid-Penn project that's in lease up now in Livermore and the coming RCD project in Fremont will have 2-bedroom units or have 2-bedroom units that are funded through 811. One of the hardest things to do when you're helping somebody find affordable housing is when you're helping somebody who needs a live-in attendant to really be able to live on their own. And needing a live-in attendant is pretty darn common. In the regional center world, especially under supported living, where many of the clients need 24-hour support to be able to live on their own, or there's concerns if there was an emergency that the person with a developmental disability may need assistance in responding to an emergency, either physically or cognitively. 2-bedroom units are often really necessary. Through Section 8, you can get a 2-bedroom unit. It's a process of requesting a reasonable accommodation. The 811 program also allows single people to get a 2-bedroom unit if they need a live-in attendant. And in both the Section 8 program and the 811 program, if you're successful in getting granted the reasonable accommodation to have a live-in attendant, what the programs do is they cover the rent for that live-in attendant. So in essence, you could be somebody with a disability who is just on SSI, very limited income. And your rent for a 2-bedroom unit for the whole unit is going to be 30% of your income. Without the 811 program and without the Section 8 program, that sort of affordability arrangement is really hard to get. You can sort of approach it through a below market rate situation where the rent is higher than what Section 8 would cover. And you can use like an ABLE account to try and make the rent affordable for the person with a disability, but it's typically very hard to do. Anyway, I just wanted to put that out there. One of our biggest, tasks as a entity that tries to, find and create affordable housing opportunities for the people we serve is to really get to know your affordable housing community and try to build relationships. That oftentimes, the relationship building thing for those of us in social services takes a while, and it takes persistence, and it takes the ability to make it clear to the housing world that agencies that provide case management services or services to enable people to live on their own is an enhancement for the nonprofit housing entity. So by that I mean housing organizations really are committed to providing housing. If they are pulled into the realm of having to do a lot of intensive social service work, that is not a good situation for them to be in, because their property management staff has a lot to do. Normally, that's a big job. And they don't oftentimes have the time or the knowledge of disability services and resources to be able to adequately support people with disabilities who have a lot of support needs in a project. That being said, there are several affordable housing funding streams that give bonus points for projects that include special needs populations. Special needs populations could be seniors who are low income. It could be people with disabilities. Oftentimes, funding sources that give priority to those projects that house special needs populations. They're very competitive funding streams. So by that, I'm thinking about the Tax Credit Allocation Committee, or TCAC, which is an affordable housing stream that many affordable housing providers are really familiar with. And in the affordable housing world, you're really in the business of applying for and blending multiple funding streams when you create a housing complex that is, addressing the needs of the low-income community. So because that's a very competitive process, they often like it when you approach them with enhanced services to meet the needs of the special needs population that they're considering housing. That means that they don't have to cover those needs themselves, and it gives some comfort to them that if they create the housing, not only will people come, but they'll be well supported living in the complex. In Alameda County, we have some great, I have to say, we're really lucky. We have great housing nonprofits. Not listed here, but I want to give a big shout out to, and I can't believe I left it off the list, is Housing Consortium of the East Bay. They're one of our great partners, and they've specifically sort of led the charge on housing opportunities for people with developmental disabilities, people who are regional center clients. And they've branched out, and now we're working with HCB in a variety of programs that they offer, especially programs where people are moving from institutionalized settings into their own homes. But you'll see here a good list, and many of these nonprofit housing entities also provide housing not just in Alameda County, but sometimes across states and definitely throughout California. Satellite Affordable Housing Associates is one, Resources for Community Development, East Bay Asian Land Development Corporation, Eden, which is a really large housing provider now, but they're headquartered in Hayward. Meta, which is a housing corporation that's done a lot of work in Southern California, is starting to move up to Alameda County. Mid-Penn Housing does a great job. They're really active in Alameda County now. There's First Community that's out of San Jose. There's Mercy Housing, which is all over the place. They provide affordable housing for a lot of different populations. Not on the list here too, can't believe I left them out, is Ecumenical Affordable Housing. They've been great partners and have included set-asides for people with disabilities in a number of their complexes in the East Bay. Okay, now we're going to get to strategies. I would say that our philosophy of helping people find affordable housing is not a straight line. It's more like a, for lack of a better term, a shotgun approach. We try to help people get on wait lists for all types of affordable housing that they might be eligible for. And if their name comes up on a wait list, then the person has an opportunity to accept or decline the opportunity. But we try to get people on any sort of available wait list that would enhance their housing situation as possible. Many projects that are done by affordable housing partners is they have below market rates, or we call them Bmr Units. Bmr Units are units that are funded through different affordable housing streams. One is tax credit allocation committee. The other could be a multi-family housing program. Those are entities at the state level that developers really often apply for. And those funding streams create below market rate units. Bmr units are often stratified. In one complex, you'll see Bmr units that are set at affordability levels for people who are at different places in the average median income for our area. Oftentimes you'll see units set aside for people who are at 50 or 60% of the average median income. Sometimes in Alameda County, you see units that are at 30 or 20% of the average median income. 50 or 60% average median income rents are not typically affordable to the people we serve, and that's a generalization. But many people we serve are on extremely limited incomes. And so a Bmr unit that's at 50 or 60% of the average median income would be, let's say, a one bedroom might be at $1,000 a month rent. If we're working with somebody who has SSI and maybe they have some part-time employment, $1,000 a month is often not that affordable. But in many of these situations, in almost every situation, I would say, a complex that offers a Bmr unit will also take a Section 8 voucher on that unit. That's the combination of subsidies that we really look for. We look for Bmr units because the rent isn't going to change on the unit anytime soon. They go up periodically, but they don't usually go up very much. And they're usually well below the threshold of what a Section 8 voucher would pay for. So a 50 to 60% Bmr rent is usually well within the threshold of what a voucher will pay for. Market rate rents sometimes are outside. Their housing's so expensive in the East Bay that usually it's very difficult to find a market rate apartment that will take Section 8 simply because the rent is too high and the housing authority has a threshold for what a voucher will pay for. Because the Bmr units are usually on newer housing, it also has the added benefit of if you're looking for housing for somebody with a physical disability and generally needs a reasonably accessible apartment, you're really wanting to look at newer housing stock, because the newer housing typically has some elements of universal design, even in units that aren't set aside specifically for people with physical disabilities. So by that, I mean, in a newer apartment, and let's say apartment that's been built in the last 25 years, generally those apartments are going to have wider doorways and reasonably a good access if you have mobility issues. You still may need to provide modifications to those units, but it's typically a lot less than an older unit. Interestingly enough, ABLE accounts can be used to pay for the rent for somebody if they're on really limited income. So we're seeing sometimes now that housing developers or property management companies that are aware of ABLE accounts are accepting that as a way to qualify for a below market rate unit, even though the person with a disability may be way below the minimum income for that unit. So it could be that somebody without a Section 8 voucher wants to apply for a below market rate unit, but let's say if it's at $1,000 for one bedroom and they're on SSI, they're not going to qualify for that unit because their income's too low. With an ABLE account, people can have assistance in paying the rent without it affecting their other public benefits. And affordable housing property management companies are more and more aware of ABLE accounts as a way to pay the rent and can use it when qualifying somebody for eligibility for the unit. We talked about this, the wait list and the struggle to get Section 8 vouchers. One thing that's really important when you're thinking about Section 8, if you have a voucher, you're getting called for a voucher, there is a rule that housing authorities have in general that if you live outside of the housing authority catchment area, so for example, if I live in Oakland and I apply for the wait list in Berkeley because it happens to be open, and that's a rare occasion, if I'm on the Berkeley waiting list and I end up getting called for a voucher, but I live in Oakland, the typical situation is that Berkeley would require me to find a place in Berkeley, live there for a year. Then after that year is up, you can, what they call port the voucher, meaning make it portable. So I could move to anywhere outside of Berkeley, anywhere in the country after that first year. Now that's really problematic for many people that we serve who maybe their job is in a specific city or their family provides a lot of support to them and maybe emergency backup attendant services, and they live in a specific location. Could be that somebody's day program is in a specific community. So moving to another community would really impact their life a lot. So what we've found is that if somebody receives a voucher in a community they don't intend to live in, many times you can use a reasonable accommodation request to allow the housing authority to allow you to port the voucher immediately upon receiving the voucher. Because housing authorities rarely open their waiting list, we have a practice in our agency to get people on waiting lists, even if it's in a different part of the state. We might have to drive the person a long way if their name comes up and they have to go through a housing authority briefing, but then we use a reasonable accommodation request to have them port the voucher. In almost every occasion, housing authorities have granted that reasonable accommodation request. This is also really important when you maybe have secured a below market rate unit already and you're waiting for a Section 8 voucher. Section 8 voucher is in a different community than your below market rate unit that you reside in. it's really important in those situations to be able to use the voucher on the below market rate units. So that in that situation, we really look to have this restriction waived of having to live in the jurisdiction of the housing authority that's given you the voucher. We've already talked about the live-in attendant. The request, either through the Section 8 program or the HUD 811 program, to allow an additional bedroom for a live-in attendant is done again through a reasonable accommodation request. And what the housing authority or the property management company, sometimes also you have to do both. You have to access a reasonable accommodation request from the housing authority, and you have to allow them to increase your voucher. Sometimes you also have to get a reasonable accommodation request from the property. This will happen in the 811 program, which isn't controlled by the housing authority, but it's really managed by the affordable housing partner. Almost all the time, reasonable accommodation requests, especially for a live-in, are directed towards a healthcare professional that knows you to sign off on the need for an additional bedroom for a live-in attendant. That may seem odd to many people, like their primary care doctor may not see them that often, may not be aware of all their disability needs, and you wonder if they would sign off on the justification for a live-in attendant. The system's really built and traditionally has looked for that authorization to come from healthcare professionals. So, it's really good practice if you are a person with a disability and you're looking to live on your own and you know that you're going to need a live-in attendant, before the housing opportunity even arises, it would be really good to prep your personal care physician on what you have in mind in terms of trying to get authorization for a live-in attendant. So they know when the moment of truth comes and you're actually making a formal reasonable accommodation request, that they're going to be on board and know why you're doing it and what the rationale is. Life Trust Care. So we bring this up. This is a new service that we're providing that specializes in case management services for people with special needs trusts. This is the project that Stephen referred to in the beginning of the presentation. Life Trust Care agencies, we have two other partner agencies that are Life Trust Care agencies. Integrated Community Services, which covers Marin and parts of San Francisco, and Bayberry, which covers a lot of counties. I'm going to mess them up, but it's Solano, Napa, Sonoma, Yolo, Lake counties. Oh, there it is. It's right in front of me.
Way up.
Yeah, go ahead. AEBI serves Alameda and parts of Contra Costa County. Life Trust Care case management services are really built towards two things. One is to connect special needs trust beneficiaries with publicly funded services that will allow them to not spend their trust money ongoing on like housing or healthcare. Case management done through the Life Trust Care agencies is really built around expertise to help people access publicly funded services and resources so that their special needs trust can really focus on more life enhancement things like, helping with furnishings or helping to take a vacation, things that will enhance somebody's life. Life Trust Care agencies also can help people access activities or things that enhance their life, organizing socialization events or helping people, do things that really they always want to do. These aren't really things that are central to their health and well-being, but are enhancements, taking a vacation, arranging that, going for outings, things like that. So Life Trust Care agencies are doing all that. And we are proud to say that the May and Stanley Smith Charitable Trust is funding us to sort of work this model to the point where it can be replicated around the state and across the country. You can contact me via email about anything on this presentation, Life Trust Care Services, any of that stuff. And I guess at this point, Steve, are we ready for questions?
Well, let me mention a couple of things, and then I was concerned that we wouldn't fill an hour. I think we could fill an hour just answering the questions that we have posed here. Let me just mention one thing about Life Trust Care before we're done with this, is that this serves special needs trust beneficiaries. Once again, in these counties, we expect to be an expanding program here. And this is open to, we're using it as the Golden State Pool Trust. It's open to private fiduciaries. Depending on the agencies, they'll work directly with family trustees and that sort of thing. The exciting thing about Life Trust Care is that it gives another level of case management, and that makes all the difference in the world here of being able to have somebody in the community. And I know, working specifically with EBI here, not only do we have staff that are knowledgeable as far as working with folks with disabilities, but one thing that East Bay Innovations and these other agencies also do is they're very much involved with the different programs in their communities, and we've been able to help get folks placed that we would never be able to do, because once again, we just don't know the territory. This is part of what EBI does. Is that pretty much correct? Or?
Yeah.
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 So I will mention this, and once again, here, I think there's one more. This is the last slide? I thought there was another. Code. Okay. Here's the last code, and let's try to plow through as many of these questions as we can here. So for those of you that are applying for credit, once again, this has been accredited for FCLE credit under the State Bar of California for attorneys, as well as that also works for fiduciaries here. Our last number is 0286, and to get the proper form, email amy@gspt.org. Let me mention a couple of things as we plow through this, because we're going to go through as many questions as we can. I don't think we're going to get through absolutely everything. I know that Tom has focused a lot on California, the Bay Area, specifically his catchment area, which is Alameda County. This obviously is a national program, and you're going to see different variations here from state to state and county to county. I think it's fair to say in California, waiting lists are just something that we have. Here's some waiting lists. I know for Ventura County, the waiting list is much shorter. In the Bay Area, the waiting list tends to be much longer. And I know we have folks that are watching from other states. So in some states, I teach in Texas under normal years, and this is 2020. This is not a normal year here. And once again, their access to HUD-related programs is much quicker than we have. So you're going to see variations, but I think overall the information that Tom gave you here is pretty universal. Would that be fair to say, Tom?
I think so. It's a little hard because I don't see the rest of the world, nation, but I think some of these strategies would hold up in other states too.
Yeah. So let's plow through a couple of these. I'm gonna work through as many as I can. So here we have a question. Here it says, I work as an IHSS caregiver. For those of you that are not familiar, which I bet you most of you are, IHSS is our attendant care program in California that's based on Medi-Cal or Medicaid eligibility. And this person has been designated as the trustee of a third-party non-grantor special needs trust that qualifies as a disability trust. She's asking, is there a conflict in being the trustee of the trust here for her sister? And I'm assuming when this comes to housing. And I would say that the answer in this case is pretty simple. as an IHSS caregiver, you tend to, as a caregiver, have a higher level of responsibility. But no, it's absolutely possible for an IHSS caregiver to be the trustee, and there isn't a conflict that I see. Okay, let's go to the next one. What good? Here's a good question. What good is a voucher when you can be on a waiting list for 2 or 3 years just to get a voucher before even looking for a place to live? My question is only 2 to 3 years, but anyway, Tom.
Yeah, many times we have a 2-step process, we call it. So while you're waiting for a voucher, it may be possible to access other opportunities where the subsidy goes with the building. So, public housing could be an option. In our area, there was an affordable bond measure passed called the A1 bond measure in Alameda County. And it's an additional funding stream where developers can apply for this bond money to finance affordable housing. And it requires them to provide 20% of the units at 20% average median income. 20 and 30% average median income rents are pretty affordable, or you're getting close to it being close to a Section 8 type rent. So it could be that there's below market rate units that are affordable. They're just not as deeply affordable as if you had a Section 8 voucher.
So, okay. Here's another one. It looks like my son will get a Section 8 voucher in Shasta County. Is there a way to transfer it to a housing authority in Contra Costa or Alameda County claiming accommodations for his disability? If so, how do you make that happen, Tom?
Well, some common reasons are, like I said, the person's job or day program is in Contra Costa County, and therefore living in Shasta would be detrimental to their ability to have access to those things. We've also justified it based on support needs. So if somebody got a voucher in Shasta, but their family was in Contra Costa County, and they needed their family as sort of a backup support to IHSS workers or supported living staff, then you could ask a reasonable accommodation to port immediately to Contra Costa County because of the backup support provided by the family. We've also asked for it in situations where people already have a below market rate unit or a unit that they're in, and they have a need for an accessible unit, and that particular unit is accessible, and it's very scarce to find an accessible unit that takes Section 8. We've also had that as a justification. So it really requires thinking through why Contra Costa. Maybe there's programs or services that more suit your family member in Contra Costa than in Shasta County, or maybe they're more available. That could be another rationale for a reasonable accommodation. Yeah.
Okay, and this may be answered 2 ways, but let's see how you interpret this. Do you have a partner company in Southern California, or is there a company you would recommend in this area, Southern California? And I'm assuming we're talking about housing, but we could expand that to the care plan.
I don't know. I know Meta, which does a lot of work in Southern California. I think certainly Mercy might be in Southern California. Eden might be. That's on the housing side. A lot of these housing nonprofits are pretty focused on specific areas of the state, but some are broader. So it would probably be helpful to look at the websites of the affordable housing agencies that I listed here in the presentation and see if they have properties in Southern California. If you're talking about the service side of things, there's a lot of great providers of supported living services and independent living services in Southern California. And I think the best thing to do might be to go to the California Supported Living Network website and look at their member agencies, or contact Mark Melanson, who's the executive director of the California Supported Living Network, to see if you can get some idea of providers in Southern California.
I mean, the other place that I probably would think of if I got this question is looking at the Lanterman Housing Alliance here. And if you Google Lanterman Housing Alliance, that should come up. So once again, I'm going to switch over to the questions, and then we'll go through the rest of the chats here. So anyway, we have the first one is comment. Housing choices voucher programs in various counties are under demonstration, moving to work umbrellas that do not limit tenant portion of rent to 1/3 income. May instead be tiered subsidy table with a capped subsidy. Tenant pays remainder, which in high housing cost areas can be up to 90% of their SSI income. Okay. I'm not familiar with that program. Are you? Or?
Well, yeah, in high cost areas, housing authorities have allowed flexibility for the recipient to pay higher than 30% of their income in order to be able to make the voucher work in high cost areas. So I haven't heard that they'd allow it up to 90%. That seems pretty high to me. But yeah, I mean, one of the problems with the Section 8 program is there is a cap on the fair market rents typically. And if you want to lease a place that exceeds that cap, then the recipient has to pay the difference.
The next one is, and this is probably gets into my bailiwick more. So this next question is, would the trustee of a third-party special needs trust, for those of you that are not familiar with special needs trust, a third-party special needs trust is an estate planning trust, usually set up by a parent or family member or that sort of thing, versus a first-party trust is when the money comes from like a personal injury settlement. So let's go back to this. When the trustee of a third-party special needs trust where the beneficiary is disabled according to Social Security here and receives a Section 8 voucher, would they have to notify the housing authority of the special needs trust, or do they receive that information from Social Security? Okay, so let me tackle this first. Part of this comes down to what is income, okay? So, right, typically, and Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, typically what we're looking at is 30% of your countable income. So the question comes down to what is countable income, okay? So for special needs trusts, that's something that still is being defined. The current rules that most housing authorities are supposed to follow here is that any regular non-medical reoccurring distribution counts as part of the countable income. So the example would be, let's say you paid somebody's cell phone bill and it was $100 a month and you paid it every month. Then that would add $100 to the countable income, okay? Things that are not reoccurring, which would be things like if you bought a car, right? You don't buy a car every month, or most of us that are rational don't do that kind of thing. Then it wouldn't count. The problem with it is that there hasn't been a real clear definition about what's a reoccurring distribution and what's not a reoccurring distribution. And it's wildly open to interpretation depending on the situation here. It's one of those things that the housing authority is not going to get it from Social Security and that sort of thing. So typically for our clients and also for the Golden State Pool Trust, you know, part of this is we tell them that, you know, when they do their reviews that they need to disclose the trust, and on the review vouchers, it'll have something about, you know, is there a trust or is there something along the line? But then that's just not enough. Part of what you have to look at here is what distributions are being made and what distributions are not being made. I will tell you, my experience has been in most cases that housing authorities oftentimes will not count any expenditures from special needs trust, but that really depends on the county you're in. I know San Mateo County and Santa Cruz County tend to count more expenditures from special needs trusts, and some counties don't count any, and it's everything in between. The other thing that I'll mention here is that it's absolutely clear that payments made from an ABLE account are not counted as income. That's actually in the federal guidelines. So oftentimes when we have a situation where it's critical, we may make our distributions to an ABLE account and then have the ABLE account make the purchases, and that way they're not counted at all. I will tell you, the actual rules are confusing. Oftentimes they're contradictory, and I've noticed that they tend to really rely a lot. They're very subjective. I know that and I forwarded some of this information to Tom too. I know they're looking at the regs and coming up with some consistencies here. And this is an area where we may be asking for some advocacy here from our disability community, because one of the proposals is to count every single expenditure from every single special needs trust, and that really would be problematic. It's a very confusing area here, but to give you that background, yes, you should disclose here, when you're doing your reviews. But the other thing is that, once again, under the current rules, what they're looking at are regular, reoccurring, non-medical distributions, but then they don't really define what that is. Tom, you have any other thoughts on that? Or
no, I'm glad you're here to answer that question.
I have to say, this is one of the questions that I dislike the most, because as an attorney, as a trustee, I want to say with certainty, this is what's going to happen and this is how it's going to be counted. And I can't really do that. It really, I've noticed it changes from housing authority to housing authority, person to person, situation to situation. So you just do your best.
I could tell you that housing authorities in Alameda County really have not questioned special needs trust income as the recipient's income. And in several situations, the housing authorities have granted reasonable accommodation for people to use their voucher to reside in a house that's owned by a special needs trust. So they've actually been pretty open about embracing the idea of a special needs trust not being treated as income for the recipient.
And that's been my experience in the immediate Bay Area. But once again, because I deal with so many different housing authorities, that how it's interpreted in your community could be vastly different. And that's something that can be difficult. And we could spend a lot of time on that, but let's not. Here. So next one, and this is from a well-known advocate. I am not seeing options for adults with severe autism. And actually, if you know the person presenting the question, that would be the kind of thing she would ask, who have severe, dangerous, or disruptive behaviors, people who need outdoor space, soundproofing, or loud, friendly spaces, and a lot of staff. Where are those options, Tom?
Well, I would say the scenario where you have a single family home that you're renting would be the best option. And that's very hard to come by. But I've seen it done in several cases, like I said, where special needs trust may own the home and the person's able to get a reasonable accommodation to use their voucher on that home. That's a solution I've seen in a couple of scenarios. And those are solutions that are specifically valuable to people who need that sort of space. And their support needs are around, helping them manage situations where they might be loud or they might be, tough on the property. So it's difficult because they're not widely available to everybody. All I can say is I've seen it happen in more than a couple of situations where people have been able to secure housing using a voucher with who have those support needs.
And it might be a good idea just to mention this. And you had mentioned that a lot of the folks who run these housing programs, they're not behavior specialists. They're landlords, right? And they really are not. A lot of these folks are not equipped to deal with a lot of the challenges when you're dealing, for instance, with somebody with severe autism and that sort of thing. Because usually you're relying on things like ILS and SLS services or that level of support, right? So many of these folks who get a HUD-based program will qualify for those support services, and those are absolutely essential services, horribly underfunded, but absolutely essential for keeping people in the community. Yeah, so anyway, plowing on to the next one. Comment, 811 mainstream vouchers are being given preferability in San Mateo County for those leaving institutions or people with disabilities who are already homeless or at risk of homelessness, but this leaves out people in family homes whose parents are reluctant to issue an eviction notice in order for their adult son or daughter to qualify. Does your experience differ?
So we just are going through this with the Chestnut Family Apartments in our partnership with Mid-Penn and Livermore. Those we're doing lease up, and there's a state, there's like a 811 committee, which consists of folks from Department of Developmental Services, from Department of Health Services, that's where Medi-Cal is housed. And then there's folks from Cal Housing and Community Development Department and Cal HFA to Housing Finance Agency. And they're comprise the 811 sort of steering committee in California. What we've been told is that the 811 program, there's 2 rounds. Round 2 and round 1 they see as similar, even though if you go to the 811 page on the Cal HCD website, it says that people who are experiencing homelessness or on the verge of homelessness and have disabilities are a eligible community for 811. But what we understand currently, the steering committee at the state level considers the priorities to be people transitioning from institutions, and secondly, people with developmental disabilities, regardless of where they're living. So they could live with their family, and eventually if their family isn't there anymore, they're going to be in a housing situation that's not sustainable. But it doesn't really appear like they're at risk of homelessness or institutionalization because they're living with their family currently. That's still considered a second priority group for the 811 program, just simply that they're regional center clients. Of course, if you're a regional center client and you're experiencing homelessness, or you're in a group home or an ICF facility or a skilled nursing facility, you'd get priority over other people with developmental disabilities who live with their families. But that's still very much a group that they want served by the 811 program, is people with developmental disabilities who are living with aging families.
Okay, our next one is, and I hope I don't screw up these acronyms, CTAC multifamily BMR properties are able to charge housing choices voucher holders up to the area fair market rent if housing authority agrees with that proposed level of rent based on area comparables. Such voucher holders have been priced out of the properties that are otherwise BMR in San Mateo and have to leave the area. So it sounds like a problem specific with San Mateo County. Are you familiar with that, Tom? Or
Yeah, you know that the BMR rents can increase in over time, but in our experience, if you have a unit that's at 50 or 60% of the area median income rent, then you're well within the voucher fair market threshold. We haven't had the experience with folks who have a voucher and a BMR unit, and the BMR unit's rent is continually raised to the point where it's going to exceed the cap on the voucher. I think that's could happen. We just haven't experienced it in our area.
so there'll be regional differences, and that's how it works. Here's a tough one. Is there a form I have to submit to the Housing Authority to report the Special Needs Trust? And we're basically talking about income. Or do I state in the review form that it is not treated as income? Are the legal codes associated with distributions or expenditures I could use as not being income? I would disclose the expenditures such as furnitures and that sort of thing. Does the Housing Authority have their own legal codes, or do they rely on the POMs, which are the regulations dealing with Social Security here? Thank you. By the way, Housing Authority has little or nothing to do with Social Security, so we're in an entirely different world, and even how they count income is entirely different. I think what this comes down to, Tom, is is annual reviews and reporting income, and how is that done? Mm-hmm. And I would love to have absolutely solid guidance on what expenditures count as income and what don't, because once again, under the current regs, we have very little guidance on what that means, especially when you have a special needs trust, which is paying in kind. We go back to this. For a third party or an estate planning trust, the rules that we have right now are regular reoccurring payments are counted as regular income. Things that are sporadic or not regular non-medical expenditures aren't, and then they don't really tell us what that means. So it's been wildly interpreted different from one area to another, and I'm not aware of a list, and if there was a list, that would be wonderful here. Something like furniture and that kind of thing, that shouldn't be a reoccurring expenditure. Paying a cell phone bill on a regular basis, it's interpreted wildly different from Housing Authority to Housing Authority. That's been my experience here. The only thing that I will mention is the safe harbor, and we will, for those of you that are going to get on our mailing list, what you would do by going to amy@gspt.org. I will be doing a program with Dante Allen here with Cal Able, and we will be talking specifically about using Able accounts, if that works, to be able to put funds from a special needs trust into an Able account, then pay for a lot of these questionable expenditures that could be interpreted as income, and that way you can feel assured that they won't be counted as income. And I wish I had a simple answer, but I don't. And I'm assuming you don't have anything to add on that. So going back to the other one, are psychiatrists and psychologists considered healthcare professionals for signing off on the need for a live-in attendant? I
think you'd have to pose that question to the Housing Authority or the property management company, whichever entity you're asking. We've had RNs be honored as a healthcare professional to sign off on the live-in request for reasonable accommodation. But I think it's safe to, it's safer to ask the entity that you're asking the accommodation from.
Yeah. Okay. My son won a lottery and was on the voucher waiting list for about 5 years, at which point he made the mistake in his response necessary to stay on the list. He was dropped. When he got the notification letter, we tried to appeal his being dropped based on his disability, that he was not didn't fully understand the instructions, and they made no effort to assist him in doing it right. Is there an appeal process for this kind of occurrence? They said absolutely no appeal allowed. It's hard to not think that this is an intentional tactic to weed out the list.
This is a really common occurrence where correspondence from the housing authority that's really critical gets sent to the person with a disability, and many times the people that are receiving services need help in going through and responding to important mail, or their staff person or attendant loses the mail. All sorts of things can happen in this realm. We've been successful in asking for an appeal and winning appeals from our local housing authorities in similar situations. So unfortunately, I think it has to do with the housing authority that you're dealing with. If they're saying absolutely no appeal, it does feel like that is a way to weed people out. You might consider contacting Disability Rights California or another legal advocacy organization to try and reopen that issue and see if you can try and, make noise and get an appeal around this herd, because it does feel like it's a reasonable accommodation issue if the person with a disability is really relying on other people to respond to mail.
And Tom, this may be somewhat of a question. HUD are federal programs. I mean, once again, part of what occurs to me is if this kind of, what's a nice term, problematic behavior, I'll try to keep my language good today, here happens, it seems like, one's legislator should know about these kind of things going on.
Yeah.
Now, would it be a state legislator, or are we talking about a federal legislator here? Because it is a federal program.
Well, they're also, HUD is, the funding stream comes from HUD, but situations like this, you could go to your HUD field office and inquire as a starting point around reasonable accommodation latitude that the housing authorities have around this. I think that would be one good strategy. Another strategy would be any elected official that might be willing to help you on this. I don't think it matters if it's a federal legislator or a state or even a county or city elected official. I think those are all good places to go in situations like this. I wanted to also add that when we train our staff around affordable housing, we always on housing authority applications, any sort of affordable housing wait lists, we leave our office address and a contact as the mailing contact. Because we serve so many people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, we want all really important correspondence, to at least a copy of it, to come to us at our office so that we can make sure that we're paying attention to all correspondence, because really that's like critical stuff.
I mean, what occurs to me is if they're doing it to this individual, they're doing it to other individuals.
Yeah.
By the way, and we have a hard stop coming up in 4.5 minutes because Mrs. Dale is fixing lunch and I don't want to be late. So moving ahead here, let's knock off some short ones. How does one receive notification when a wait list occurs? That's a good question.
There's more and more affordable housing development corporations that have automatic, you go to their website and you can sign up for automatic wait list notifications for their properties. For housing authorities, more and more, it seems like if you're networked in the disability community, you will see something pop up on alerts on waiting lists for the housing authorities. I don't know if there's any magic around that, other than just really being aware of when wait lists are opening up. Definitely, I would suggest for nonprofit housing entities, affordable housing entities, to look at websites for automatic wait list notifications.
Yeah, and I know for myself, usually where I get the notification is, and I'm on a ton of different lists. In the immediate East Bay area, the Contra Costa County Developmental Disabilities Council, as well as the Alameda County Public DD Council is usually pretty good about letting you know. The State Council with Nicholas Sheridan, she's always on top of these things and all that. So I don't know if there's a systematic way, but usually when they open up, I'll get about 4 emails. And oftentimes those wait lists aren't open for very long, are they? Or
no. Yeah.
And I know it's different in different communities because once again, in Texas, they don't seem to have the problem that we have. But another one, and I think this actually begs a larger question. What about adults who acquire their disability in adulthood? Do these programs only apply to individuals who are disabled, but not developmental disabilities? So, I mean, Tom, obviously you work primarily with folks that have intellectual and developmental disabilities when you're working, with your traditional group. Although once again, with the life planning group, you've expanded it. But once again, do you have to be disabled, and specifically, do you have to be developmentally disabled to be on these programs?
No. It's simply that you have a disability and you're considered low income is the access to the Section 8 program. Also could be access to the 811 program. Many people that we serve who don't have developmental disabilities but are residing in skilled nursing facilities, had an accident or an illness after they became adults that have left them with a disability. So those folks, are eligible through the 811 program as well. Yeah, so it's not germane to the housing side of things that people have a disability before they're adults. It mainly seems to be an issue with access to services. So people with developmental disabilities, for whatever reason, have access to more enhanced services than people outside of the developmental disability service system. Really, folks outside the developmental disability service system need support to live on their own. The main source of support is the in-home support services, IHSS program, administered through the counties. Okay,
and then just because we do have to hit a hard stop, because I'm sure we could do this all day here, the last hard involved question is it possible for an SB 329 and an SB 222 might be repealed if landlords appeal the measure? Are there any protections for recipients of Section 8 that already reside in such housing?
I'm not familiar with the 2 pieces of legislation that were quoted there. Maybe they're the requirements that landlords accept Section 8. I'm not really sure what the reference is.
I think something real quick, just since we are going to have to go in a bit. Housing remains a huge issue. There's a lot of policy work going on right now dealing with housing, and this affects all persons with disabilities and and all Californians. So we're going to see, I'm predicting we're going to see more on HUD and housing programs and that kind of thing. And a lot of these programs here, in order to influence them, it's really important that we are all good advocates about the need, educating our decision makers, our legislators, and that sort of thing on the need for affordable housing and the challenges for folks with disabilities, all disabilities here with housing. So These programs are evolving. Some of the proposals out there, I think, are designed to cut down expenditures. Some are designed to make it easier. And this is one of those things that we really do need to support our providers and our disability organizations that really work on these different subjects. I think there's going to be a lot coming up in the near future on that, and some changes that I've seen that, some of them seem to be good and some of them are horrific. So this is something that we always, it's like everything in the disability community, it's something that we all have to advocate on. And this isn't just for folks with IDD, this is for folks with behavioral health issues, physical issues, that sort of thing. Housing affects everybody. So, along with this is that that we are going to need to make sure that we continue to have support of the community here to continue these programs, because obviously trying to find appropriate housing for folks with disabilities is a key part of their living in the community. Tom, any last words before we're done here? And
I think your words about advocacy are spot on. This is all, subject to the whims of policymakers. So, as with all human services, we have to be vigilant about policies that impact the limited access that these programs have. We don't want it limited more, we want more access. So I think that's spot on, Stephen, and thank you for the opportunity to do this presentation. Really appreciate it.
Great. So in closing this off here, if you would like to be on our mailing list, or if you're interested in the materials here, or if you're looking for MCLE credit, what you need to do is email Amy, AMY, @gspt.org. Stay tuned. We'll be doing more programs coming up. I know there were a number of questions about ABLE as well. So some of that will be covered with Dante. And if you're on the list, we'll make sure you know about that. And with that, I'm going to say thank you very much, Tom, and happy advocating.
Thank you.